Chris, let's start with you. We'll start with the facts, because they're actually quite hard to pin down. There have been claims and counterclaims on both sides until, and I've watched it all very closely, I don't know who is telling the truth.
It's huge, isn't it? I think the main thing to think about is nothing will change tomorrow. In fact, we might think about the UK different emotionally, I think. Nothing will change tomorrow. There will be 18 months of negotiations if Scotland votes to separate. Now, Independence Day, as Alex Salmond once said, is in March 2016, and the debates will run well beyond tomorrow. Yes, they're climaxing this week, but over the next 18 months, these negotiations will go on, and many people think they might be, they might be just quite unpleasant. A divorce is often unpleasant, and this is what it is. It's a divorce between what will become known as the RUC, the rest of the UK and Scotland.
Well, let's look at some of the key points, and from your position, and studying this quite carefully, what you've come to know as being as close to the facts as possible. The currency of Scotland.
The most controversial part, yes. Alex Salmond initially wanted to have the euro, then decided he didn't want to have the euro. He also decided, because of the questions that could have been raised about the uncertainty, he decided not to have Scotland's own currency. So his proposal is to share the pound, is to have a currency union between Scotland and the rest of the UK. It's by far and away the most controversial thing. The leader of the Better Together campaign, Alistair Darling, has debated this long and hard with Alex Salmond. Essentially, though, it means if Scotland breaks away, then the Bank of England in a foreign country will be what's known as the lender of last resort for Scottish banks, for Scottish institutions. It also means the interest rate for Scotland will be set in London by the Bank of England in a foreign country, and that's the most controversial part of all this, and one of the biggest question marks.
Would they be accepted by the EU if they wanted to use the euro? Again,
the European Commission have been quite clear that if you vote to separate from a member state, then you walk away from the EU and you have to reapply. If you reapply, one of the conditions for joining the European Union is to have the euro. Alex Salmond has also been quite clear. He believes that Scottish voters are part of the EU at the moment, and they would be entitled to continue their membership.
What happens on the border? Passports?
No. There's a sort of common border area at the moment between England, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and there will be no border controls. You'll still be able to cross the border. One of the big issues, I think, is if they put in border controls, clearly that would put huge costs on businesses who do a lot of trade sort of north and south of the border. So I don't think you will notice very much difference at all when you cross the border.
What about Wales? Could they be next?
Well, I was in Wales recently, actually, and yes, there's a Welsh Nationalist Party, Plaid Cymru, but the support for independence in Wales simply isn't there. The most recent poll was around 17%. Before that, it was 12%. Wales, of course, has devolution. It has its own assembly already. But if you talk to people, as I did in Wales, they don't have the same confidence about becoming an independent country. They don't think that Wales has the same natural resources as Scotland does. And, of course, the biggest resource Scotland has is oil.
And what about companies, then, in Scotland? Will they up sticks and leave?
Well, you've heard, in the last week or so, a number of companies have entered this debate, and we've been trying to get them to engage in this debate for some time, and they haven't. But in the last couple of weeks, they have decided to. Now, a number of banks said that they would potentially move their headquarters south of the border. That's not the employees, that's not jobs, as the First Minister of Scotland, Alex Salmond, has pointed out, but they might just move their brass plate south of the border. So that's possible. As far as businesses are concerned, retailers like John Lewis, some of the supermarkets have said, look, at the moment, it's more expensive to trade in Scotland because it's further away, because the stores are so much further apart. Those costs at the moment are assumed into the business, and therefore it's shared across the whole of the UK. If Scotland was a separate country, we'd have to think of that again, and that's why they've warned that costs in Scotland could go up after independence.
And they're saying 1/12 of the budget deficit belongs to Scotland, so financially, where would that leave them?
Well, it depends how you divide up the debt, OK? We've got about £1.3 trillion worth of debt at the moment. How much does Scotland take? If you divide it up by their population share, Scotland have about 8.4% of the population at the moment. That leaves Scotland with £150 billion of debt to service. However, the other way of dividing it up is to say, well, let's go back. Let's look at what Scotland's contributed to the UK since 1980, since we've been giving oil reserves and oil revenue to the UK Exchequer, and it could therefore be much lower. It could be around 100 billion, but still quite a lot of money for a new country to service, and he'll have to go to the bond markets, and there will be no history. They won't know how to set the interest rate for Scotland, so that's still quite uncertain.